What's going on, gamers? So this is an interesting video by Digital Foundry here. And it's a topic people have talked about for a while. Definitely when the Pro came out too, it was a topic that resurged and caught fire for a long time. And it's about, can you build a console-like PC experience for actual console prices? And there are some people that said yes to a degree, but honestly, if we dive into it like Digital did, and like I've told people before, I would say that it is harder for one purpose. And we're going to understand why when this video is over with. VRAM. Definitely as time moves forward more and more, VRAM 8 gigabyte limitations does start to become an issue. And on consoles, that's not a problem because AMD is more free-hearted with their VRAM, whereas NVIDIA is more stingy. For example, the consoles have 16 gigabytes of VRAM. I think that's really good. And when developers design most things around games today, they design them around that. And that means that when you port it to PC, for people who are having the video, they have to deal with under 16 gigabyte cards and a lot of facets because they still sometimes can be stingy with that. And I just don't understand why they're still doing that. And what that does is that creates some texture setting issues, whereas the PC would be high on everything else besides VRAM. If you don't have those 16 gigs of VRAM, you have to deal with certain settings that can be kind of annoying. So when you're trying to build a console or the PC to be just like the console, if you had to target a 16 gigabyte card out in the video world, you're going to be spending a lot of money, and that's just going to be annoying. So that's where it can be a problem. Whereas AMD can give you 16 gigabyte cards differently, and you'd be able to get closer with a better price on the AMD side. This is what I want to add in before we get to this video. Now, what's also interesting too is even then, if you're still trying to go for the 16 gigabyte in the AMD market separately, it's still hard, and that VRAM cost is what makes it very hard. So let's get into this. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what y'all know. This is going to be, more of an intellectual, educational type video about this type of subject.
Anyway, final question. This one from Degenerative AI. Greetings, gents. Do you think we'll ever get to a point during this generation where you can build an equivalent or better PC for the same price as a console? You can already do this with used parts if you manage to get lucky with good deals, but it's only really valid if you ignore that used consoles or official/retailer refurb.
That's something else to add in, which is also very interesting. Just to stop him real quick. A lot of times you can get the consoles on sales. Hell, even trying to get the VRAM and the Series S when it's on sale for like 250 is still an insane deal when we think about VRAM, right? And just what it would take to even just get all those little parts to make a PC. It's just not happening. You're not getting that deal. You know what I mean? Like, no. Same thing with like getting the Slim or the PlayStation 5 on sale for like, $400 or whatever, and getting the Series X for like 450, or when they put that on 399. Like, that's just an unbelievable deal when you just look at it from a PC spec situation, saying I'm getting 16 gigabytes of VRAM with a $400 computer. What?
With a warranty exists too. On the budget side, you can readily get chips that outperform the aging Zen 2 parts in consoles. Unfortunately, in the budget GPU tier, we still have upcoming cards, namely 5060 and 9060, expected to release with 8 gig VRAM models, significantly lower than PS5 Series X have access to, requiring settings compromises and having questionable longevity. Will the VRAM skimping ever end? So we got two questions there, really. They are obviously interconnected, of course.
I think next
This concept of being able to buy an equivalent or better PC for the same price as a console, and the VRAM skimping. The VRAM skimping thing, I kind of think it may persist into this generation and possibly then move on from there. I mean, just from a competition side of things, Intel are coming in with 10 and 12 gig models at the budget side. Surely at some point we've got to move on from 8 gigs, Alex.
Yeah, 8 gigs is just such a big anchor around any sort of movement. Like, you've got this GPU which has like shading power, it's got machine learning, it has the ability to do frame gen. It can potentially do all these great things, but it's limited to like, please only play at 1080p for the love of God. Like, that's like all it says. And then it's like every single time a game comes out that is problematic, and there's more and more of them each time, because I'm sorry, a lot of devs really are not putting a good focus on this when they should at times, but also 8 gigs, like that is a limiting factor when you have more on console to work with for texture memory specifically.
Yeah.
And, there's only so much you can expect of developers in scaling, and you should expect more eventually at some point from your GPU. Apparently Nvidia did at some point too with the 3060 12 gig. Like they apparently also thought it was worth it at some point, and then they're like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm not happy
Yeah.
about it. I would not at all buy an 8 gigabyte GPU. I would flat out disrecommend every single person playing AAA games to buy a new 8 gigabyte GPU. Like if it comes out, I'm just gonna flat out know it. So yeah, I don't think with the first part of the question here is going to be a realistic possibility in the current future for new products coming out. The used one was already mentioned, but for new products, the console buyers now, they have access to, since they're buying in bulk and buying direct, they have a completely different pricing scheme, and they're
Yeah.
manufacturing so many more units. And they're part of the design process. It's not at all going to be any point in the near future where you get a $499 complete PC that is going to be rivaling the GPU experience you get there on the console side. I don't think, and
Yeah.
I think that is really unfortunate. It's definitely a newer thing that happened this time around, but Rich has talked about it a bunch of times before. The manufacturing situation is completely different now.
Yeah. Just my thoughts on this quickly.
So yeah, what he said right there actually makes a lot of sense. It's like I was saying at the beginning of the video. The difference in value is the VRAM difference if you're trying to match the console to build a PC close to around it and get a cheap PC. But as I tell people before, don't do that. If you're going to get a PC, blow away the console. If you want to get something around the price of a console, get the damn console. You know what I mean? Like, because it just makes more sense to me. Why do you want to make a PC that freaking cheap? Like, because you're just going to have to upgrade it eventually. You know what I mean? And then you're going to have to get all those parts over again. Whereas, like, the most important thing is to get that motherboard that can play everything even years down the line. You want that most expensive motherboard or the best motherboard at that time. And then obviously CPU is important because then you will have so much speed and so much memory cache on the L1, L2, L3 threads to run whatever power comes your way. And then obviously the power supply, you don't want to, you can replace it, but if I build a PC and I'm like, okay, even if it's a high-end PC, it takes this many watts, give me an extra 400 from this. Because if I want to upgrade a card, even 2 to 3 years down the line, I don't need an extra 400 watts to do that. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, it just has a longevity to it, unless you just like burn that all out for a very long time and overclock stuff and all that. But yeah, I just don't see the point of building a PC close to a console. No, even if you have to save up over time, blow it out the water. 'Cause you use it for so many other different things too. But this has been a topic though, this generation, big time, about trying to get a console like PC experience. And even as we go 5 years down the line, well, I say 4 years and a few months because they came out at the end of 2020, it's still not because of the way the economy is and the inflation and all this other stuff. So it hasn't changed much, honestly. When we think about trying to match that experience without having that at least 12 to 16 gigabytes of VRAM, it's just a pain in the ass. So yeah, the console it has a better value at that price point.
The thing about the consoles, of course, is that there's the total cost of ownership, which essentially requires a significant subscription.
That does matter
So
too.
obviously the situation changed somewhat with the PS5 Pro being a $700 console. Even
He's right because and I've said this before, and I should have brought this up recently, but I'm glad Rich reminded me. You got to pay like 100 and something bucks a year for the online service. Game Pass is different compared to Plus. So you're going to be playing on consoles for at least 5 to 6 years before you get to the new one. Yeah, that's another 500 plus dollars, 600 plus dollars, right? That's just knowing that you need to do that if you want to play online, right? Not even buying any video games that are full price that you don't get a discount on either. So there is a lot of value propositions to look at.
and more expensive in Europe, of course. So yeah, there's a lot of sort of variables to take into account when building an equivalent or better PC. But that equivalent or better PC really does need a GPU with at least 12 gigs of memory. That's the kind of issue that you've got there.
Yep.
So we kind of need those 12 gig GPUs to come down. We've got a 5060 Ti coming, which will have 16 gigs, but I'm
Okay.
really worried that they're going to do what they did with 4060 Ti and slap on $100 price premium on that, which would just be nuts.
They will.
I really hope they do something about that. 5060 being 8 gigs, it's not great, is it? But AMD seem to be doing the same thing with an 8/16 gig differential on 9060 and 9060 XT, if the rumors are to be believed. I can kind of see why this is happening because, both of the vendors there are going to be having phone home data that's basically saying, well, if these guys are just playing Rainbow Six or Fortnite or whatever on their 60 class products, might as well ship with 8 gigs of memory. But then you get the concept of people wanting to buy, new games, not just the live service stuff, which has to run across a broad range of hardware, and they're going to come up short.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's right, because when they do that, they're thinking about the casual audience. It's always that, because that's what's going to make the most money. They're not going to get the high end. And they do want to play those games. And most people, like there was a demographic that came out last month where it said like 50-some% of the community is playing those live service games like that. 50% of the gaming community. You know how big the gaming community is? Yeah, it's over 1 billion people easily. So when you have that many people, then they want to make a mass marketing appeal to that type of audience. That's why we got to look at the demographic. Of course, I'm super hardcore. I always will be. But if we want to understand the full spectrum too, and a large portion of it, we have to peer into that demographic as well, and realize how that goes. So when you're speaking to, you got to make sure you're speaking to a larger audience too, and not just from your perspective of what you're seeing from a hardcore perspective. And that's what makes somebody good at being the right person on a platform or for the job, because they can read all the audiences in different spectrums and be able to talk to all of them, not just a one-dimensional perspective. So that goes back to basically what I was saying, when it comes to why would you want to build a PC like a console experience? I would tell you, I think you shouldn't. That you should build something better, if you had to save up. And that if you just want to only spend that much around a device for gaming, then you should just stick with the console then. There's nothing wrong with that. It all depends on what do you play, what do you want it for? Like he was saying with Fortnite, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the experience is just, most people just want to get the gaming experience. That's the average gamer, you know what I mean? Not the hardcore gamers. So that's my thing with that. And the VRAM is a problem, but it isn't a problem if you are on PC specifically. Even if you do have a high-end gaming PC and you don't have 16 gigs, you still can move around settings to adjust it and still turn up settings higher that are not VRAM specific. Because there's a lot of settings that never appear on the console that appear in the PC menu where it's like, this doesn't use VRAM, this doesn't use VRAM. You know what I mean? It's using GPU, it's using CPU, but it doesn't require VRAM usage. And you can crank those settings all the way up. And that card is better than the one that would be on the console easily. It just doesn't have the equal VRAM. Like if you had like a 4070 laptop or whatever like that, or maybe if they're doing that with the 5070, which I think the 57 actually this time is going to have 12 gigs or something, or maybe 16 or whatever. But that thing is still going to be insanely more powerful in all other dimensions that are not VRAM heavy. But once you get to that 12, you're fine. So it just depends. And if you guys ever have any questions about that, ask me.
And yeah, that's just not great. Do you have any input on this, Oliver?
Yeah, I just think the efficiencies of producing one specially constructed box with few middlemen, with no extra PCIe or SATA or a box that's inefficiently designed and maybe made of a premium construction material like aluminum, or all these efficiencies with no spare cent spent, as I put it. It should mean that if console makers are doing their job, then building an equivalent PC with new parts for a similar price shouldn't really be possible. The only exception I would think is like in some world where there's some crazy performance enhancing feature on PC that isn't available on consoles, maybe it's
Yeah.
more achievable in that world. And the VRAM question, I don't think it will end this generation, but maybe those non-binary RAM configurations that you could fit, like say 12 gigabytes on a 128-bit bus. That's kind of the particular pain point at the moment with those lower tier cards. Maybe that'll be something that's more common next generation, but it doesn't really seem to be something that we're going to see a whole lot of this generation, at least not immediately. So that's maybe in the future it will be ameliorated to some degree by that fact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Another thing, I don't know if you guys knew about it. Jesus. But NVIDIA, when they released their DLSS 4 model, they actually have now VRAM decompression. Aims to reduce VRAM usage and improve performance by leveraging AI-powered techniques, including a new transformer AI model for DLSS super resolution, ray reconstruction, and DLAA. It's not a major VRAM decompression, but if they're saying, hey, man, we're giving you an extra 0.5 gigabytes, and maybe there might be more of those situations to have, that makes a big difference on certain settings to where you might be able to get these settings going because you have that. And I've tried it before, and it actually does work. So it's pretty nice to know that now they're working on a system now where, you know, how everything else kind of takes shortcuts. You're going to have VRAM shortcuts to where you're not using as much. And I think that's pretty cool. So that's just something to add in if people didn't know about that.
Yeah, that 3060 situation was kind of interesting, wasn't it, Alex? I think it was a $330 product. It had a 192-bit memory interface, so they kind of had to ship with either 6 or 12 gigs, and 6 gigs was becoming untenable at that point, I would say. So they shipped with 12, but then ultimately what they did was to cut back and produce an 8 gig version of the 3060, which, you know,
Yeah.
it's enough to make you want to run out into the street and attack people with hammers.
Like it's not only that, but it's like the PCIe lanes too. Like I showed it off in Senua's Sacrifice, right?
Right, yeah. The PCIe situation isn't great either.
It stutters.
I agree with them, man. It's annoying. Like NVIDIA cheaps out. It's like, wait, you're charging people so much, you make so much money. Why are you still doing 8 gigabytes? You should, if you want to be ahead of AMD in every department, all your cards, the cheapest that anyone should be able to get is a 12 gigabyte beat. It's annoying.
There's more than a 2070 Super, which is fundamentally more powerful in every other aspect. You know, like why is my newer GPU stuttering more than an older one? It would also stutter more than a 2060 Super, for example. So like I just feel like they're just taking so many little bits out of these GPUs, like the reduced bus, the reduced RAM speed, the reduced amount of RAM, reduced lanes, and it's like it is this little tiny card with a really big cooler still, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't like that product at all. 3060 on the other hand, I laughed at it originally. I was like, but now I prefer it actually quite a bit more to the 4060. It is a lot better GPU.
Yeah, I mean less performant on compute, but you know the memory side of things makes up for things quite significantly, doesn't it?
Yeah, like if you're playing Spider-Man, would you really rather have it stuttering all the time and worse textures, or just like, you know, like 15 to 20% lower performance? Like what would you rather have? And I think with a VRR monitor, there's a very easy answer to that question. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing, of course, is that, you know, the 4060 is going to be put into a lot of systems that have got PCIe 3.0 slots. So, you know, that's really not good.
Nope. It's untenable at that point, actually.
Okay.
So there we have it. They're basically just explaining why, you know, the GPU limitation is the problem why you can't build a PC to match the console experience. It's the VRAM, first and foremost. And it's a good video to understand why that. You know, that is basically the thing here. So even till this day, years down the line, and with newer parts coming around, things are just not cheaper still. So yeah, that's why they had to mention that sell aspect. So like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you guys think. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Peace out, y'all.